Hi there, Sugar Snaps. I've been sharing a series on how to decorate Easter eggs using natural dyes and other methods. Today I'm using beeswax to do a batiking technique, which is where you put hot wax onto the shell of the egg and then you put that into a dye bath, and where the wax is will remain the same color as the original egg, and then around it will dye. So you can do this on a white egg and go straight into a dye bath, and the parts under the wax will be white, or you can do it on a dyed egg and dye it first, put the wax on, and then put it in another color to create a combo of colors and show when you remove the wax you'll have the original color show through. So I'll go over the materials here. I have a baggie of organic beeswax. These are just small pieces of beeswax that will melt down and use as the mask on the egg. You'll want a bowl or jar, or I have a glass measuring cup here that you put the wax in, and then we'll put that on the heat to melt. I have here, you'll either want a stove or a hot plate. Here I have my hot plate set up, and I'm creating a double boiler effect by having my pot of water. I have a pot with 2 inches of water coming to you want some source of heat, whether that's a hot plate like I have here or a stove top, and you're going to be creating a double boiler system. So you have your wax in a glass jar or a bowl, and then you'll have a pot with 2 inches of water in the bottom that you'll place your bowl inside. We'll place that in here now, and your wax will begin to melt in that system. You'll also want a bowl to blow your egg out into. You'll want some white eggs, a spoon, a couple different sizes of paintbrushes. You'll need a tack in order to create the holes in your egg. I have a chopstick here. I have a skewer here. This is just a bamboo skewer that will put the egg through over top so that you can better hold it to put on your designs. A bowl with a little bit of water, some Castile soap, and a jar of dye. And if you want to learn how to make your own natural dyes, check out this video here where I go over how to create natural dyes out of kitchen scraps and produce. This one is red cabbage. This is red cabbage without anything in it. It's just without a vinegar or a baking soda to change the pH. This is just plain cabbage water. So you'll want some sort of dye. You could also do this process with the Easter egg tablet kits that you can get at the grocery store, but I like to do it with the natural dyes. You'll also want a towel for cleaning up your surface and just having it handy to work with. Okay, so for setting up your wax, we'll do that first because it takes some time to allow it to melt. I put some wax beads in here, and I've used this to make beeswax wraps, so I've already had it set up. But you put the wax into your bowl, and then you'll put your bowl or measuring cup into the water, and you set it in the water, and you'll want to keep an eye on it, check on it every once in a while to give it a stir, mix everything up until it forms a liquid, and that's when you're going to take it out of, or that's when you'll be able to use it. So I have a popsicle stick here or tongue depressor, and I'm using that as my stir stick as well. You can use a spoon. Use something that you could potentially toss out because removing the wax is difficult with water and soap. It's you'll have to use heat to remove it. So using something that you can either keep for wax purposes or toss when you're done is good. Okay, so my pot is on a slow simmer. Keep it at a slow simmer until your wax is melted, and we'll revisit this in just a minute. Okay, so next you'll want to remove the egg white and egg yolk out of the egg. And to do that, you'll have your tack, and we're going to create a hole by punching the tack through the top of the egg and then the bottom of the egg, and then we'll be able to blow the contents through those holes. So I'm going to gently come in here and create a hole, and then work around to create a slightly bigger hole than what the tack point actually makes itself. So you want about 1/8 of an inch in diameter hole in the top and the bottom, maybe slightly bigger in order to make it easier to blow the egg out. Okay, so I have a hole on that end. I'm gonna flip it over and create a hole on this end. And you can grip it with your hand to kind of steady it so that it's in the palm of your hand and you're wrapping your hand around it. And then position one finger against the egg and gently kind of rotating the tack, punch a hole, and then extend out your hole by punching holes around it. Like so. And then roll your tack around those holes to extend them out a bit. Okay, so now I'm gonna come over here into my water and rinse off the side. You want to rinse it off and then dry it off before you put your mouth on it to blow the egg out, just so you don't ingest any of the egg white. You don't want the potential of salmonella. So, okay, so you can already see some of the egg is dripping through the bottom. So I'm going to breathe through the hole and the egg will come out on the other end. So just put your mouth around the end of the egg and blow gently, and it will come on through like this, like so. Okay, and when it's all blown through, you can set that aside and use your egg for other purposes. Now, your egg shell will still have some egg on the inside coating the walls of the egg, and we want to clean that out so that it can dry and you can use it as an ornament, and it won't start to smell. So we'll put this in the water and we want it to fill up. So kind of fill it up with some water. The bubbles will start to come out of the end as the water seeps into the egg. And once you have a little bit of water in there, go ahead and close both ends with your fingers so that they're covered, and then shake the water around in the egg for a second. Wipe off the end, and then you'll blow that water out. Okay, so that's the egg cleared out. Now dump a little bit of the Castile soap onto your egg and wash it off to get any oils or other impurities off the outside of the egg. Okay. And blow any excess water out. Okay, and then you want to dry it off because the wax won't stick if the egg is wet. So dry it off and then give it a couple minutes to finish drying off. I like having these little mason jar lids here because you can set them in there and they won't roll away. Okay, so check on your wax, and when it comes to liquid form, you're ready to put designs on your egg. So I've got good liquid consistency here. Okay, so leave it on that low temperature, maybe lower it a little bit so that it doesn't come to a boil, but you want it to remain hot because as soon as the wax comes off of the heat, it starts to harden and you'll be unable to use it at that point. So here I have an example egg that I did. This, I just did some random dots on the outside of the egg and then dyed it in blueberry, and the blueberry turned this deep charcoaly gray on this egg. So here's just an example of something you can do. You can do a little bit more complicated designs if you want to. It's a lot of dipping the brush into the wax and then working really quickly, just a small amount of surface, and then going back to the wax. And it just kind of really just dropping bits of wax to form your design. So we can experiment with that process. The closer you are to the wax bowl, the better, because you won't be traveling as far. The wax won't have as much time to cool down. So before we do that, I had you grab a skewer, and I did that because if you put the skewer through one hole and then the other, you might have to extend your hole a little bit. Then you can hold either side of the skewer and be able to decorate while rotating the egg around. So it's a little bit easier to handle without trying to hold it and apply the wax. So you can hold it to one side. So now grab one of your paint brushes, and I have one already started here. I'm gonna heat off. Whenever you start with a tool that has wax on it, like this brush has some wax globbed on it, just leave it in the wax for a few minutes, and that wax, that's the residue wax, will melt off into the wax in your jar, and then you'll be able to use your brush freely once again. Okay, so my brush is free of wax, and I'm ready to start creating my design. Before you start, it's probably helpful to have a bit of an idea of what you want the design to look like, or just play around if you just want to put glops on like I did for my test egg. But you can put flowers on it, spirals, dots, any design you can think of. You could decorate, do patterns with dots to create geometric shapes or whatnot. So go ahead and be creative with your process, and create a design that you think you'll like. So doing that, I'm going to use some lines and dots to create some sort of pattern. And I think I'm going to try to create lines down the egg and then do patterns with dots in between each of the lines. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so I'm dipping my brush in the wax mixture, and then I'm going to lift it out and apply it to the outside of the egg. And then as soon as the brush becomes stiff and it's not producing any warm wax, dip it back in, lift it out, brush it on your egg. And like here, I created a drip as I lifted it out. So just be aware, the wax is warm and it is liquid at first. It dries quickly, but it is a liquid at first. So just keep that in mind as you're working with it. High drip potential. So that line worked out pretty well. I'm not getting exact edges. My line is not going to be perfectly straight, and it's going to have some bumps and curves in the edges. But I'm okay with that. There is a technique, I believe it's, there's a technique in Russia for decorating eggs using a wax system, and I'll leave a link in the description below on what that looks like for sure. But they use a special tool where the wax warms and comes out of a little nozzle as they drip it onto the egg, so that it is slightly simpler because it's being heated and drizzling out at the same rate, and so you're not having the issue of the wax hardening as you're working with it. But this is a good way to experiment with the process at home with the tools that you probably have around your house. I mean, I think you probably have them around your house. I don't know. Do normal people have paintbrushes and hot plates and Castile soap just sitting around? I'm not sure. Okay, I'm getting some nice lines here. I'm really happy with how this is working. And being so close to the pot is really key because the wax transfers so much easier. It stays fluid long enough. Okay, so I have some lines up and down the outside of my egg, and now I'm going to go in and create some little flowers. Between the lines. Maybe a leaf. I'll put some dots down the center of this one. Before you rotate it, make sure your wax is solid so that it doesn't drip. Okay, so there's my egg covered in wax. Let's leave this to set for a second. I'll let it hang over this bowl. Let it set for about 5 minutes to allow the wax to completely harden, and then we'll put it into the dye bath. Now we're ready to put our Easter egg into the dye bath. And again, check out this video on how to create your own natural dyes for dyeing Easter eggs. So I have purple cabbage dye here, or red cabbage dye here, and I'm going to take my egg and pull it off of the skewer. Pull it off of the skewer, and then I need this to go into the water, into the dye bath, and sink to the bottom. So I can do that in two ways, by either trying to fill it up with water so that it does sink, or using a utensil to hold it down. So I'll tilt it to an angle so that it starts to fill up with the dye and see if it will sink. Sometimes it takes a minute for the egg to fill up, if it's going to, and that worked pretty well. But I want it to be totally submerged, so I'm going to put a ladle on top, or a spoon on top, to hold it down further in the water. So I'll place this spoon over top gently, and that will hold the egg into the jar of dye, and try to do it so that it's not shoved up against the side, so that it gets dye to all sides of the egg. Okay, so allow this to sit for 30 minutes to a couple of hours, up to 8 hours if you like a really dark color, and then we'll take it out and you'll be able to remove or melt off the wax. The dye bath that you use to dye your batiked eggs needs to be cool so that it doesn't melt off the wax. So don't use a dye that you've just processed and that's still warm. Allow it to cool, maybe put it in the fridge, and then once it's cool, you can put your egg in there and it won't melt the wax off, and you'll get that nice relief look. Okay, so I've pulled the batiked egg out of the dyes. I dipped it in purple cabbage for about 30 minutes, took it out, allowed that to dry, and then put it into a beet juice dye bath, and ended up with kind of a greenish lavender color, and I'll show you a close-up picture here in a minute. The next step is to remove the wax. You can see the wax is on the egg and it showing up, and we can do that by going in and gently removing it with your fingers, or using some sort of sharp tool to kind of scrape the surface. And these dots come off very easily by just scraping them off like so. You can also run this under hot water and use a little scraping tool to scrape off the wax as it begins to melt in the hot water. And for these stripes, I might do that to get them all off. But coming through and scraping it off with your fingernail or with a knife is also a good way to go. And you can see underneath you have a nice white surface where the original color of the egg is. And again, you could do this on an egg that you previously dyed and then dip it into a secondary color to over dye that first color. And that's a great way to experiment with doing double dips. So dipping in one natural dye and then another, or dipping into whatever dye solution you're working with. Be sure to check out the description below for the links to all my other egg dyeing decorating videos, natural dyeing eggs, and other techniques. And if you find this interesting and you want to see more like this video, give this video a like because it helps me keep the channel going. Okay, so I'm coming up on the last couple sections, and I'm just scraping the wax gently off as I go, rotating the egg. And this is working pretty well, just using my fingers. I'll get the last bit of residue off with some heat. But okay, so once you get the majority of the wax off your egg, you can look it over And if you removed all your wax, all the spots that I did, all the wax is removed off those areas because they just popped off. But I have a little bit more residual wax on these other spots. The thing about the natural dyes on the Easter egg is if you rub too hard on them, they will begin to show signs of wear or start to wash off. So be gentle if you're using an egg that you naturally dyed. Another way to go about removing the wax from the egg is to get a piece of really stiff cardstock or cardboard and running it over the spots on the egg where the wax was, and that will remove the last bits of wax. And doing it this way, removing it without getting it wet, means that you're saving the appearance of the dye or the color as it is right now. If you run it through water and you used a natural dye, it can start to wear away some of that pigmentation. So removing it without water at this point may be a good idea. Okay, so once you've got it all scraped, you have your decorated egg, and you can turn it into an ornament, decorate your spring decor tree with this egg, or do whatever you want to do with it. Use it as a table decoration in a centerpiece, something like that. Check out this video up here on how to create Easter egg ornaments out of your naturally dyed and batik eggs, and how to create a spring tree to hang them on. Check the description for all the links to the materials and tools I used in this video, as well as all the other egg decorating videos that I've been sharing, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.